Good afternoon, everyone. We've just come from the joint Justice Ministerial Conference, where we've had a very successful day. Really grateful to be joined by Dylan, the Justice Minister from the Netherlands, with whom I co-hosted. We had a successful day. The Chief Prosecutor made his shopping list, if you like, of the areas of support that he needs to do the job, particularly in relation to Ukraine, but also his wider mandate. We also were lucky enough to hear from President Zelensky directly, and I can tell you that we raised over £4 million in additional contributions and a whole range of non-financial technical support for the work of the ICC, from disaster victim identification experts, the Danish have offered, through to forensic experts from our Dutch friends and the Belgians and the Czechs, the list of support that we provided, investigative support, but also support with witnesses. And as well as that, there is an interesting offer from Ghana for a relocation agreement for victims and witnesses, and a whole range. That's just a sense of some of the highlights. But given the indictment of President Putin on Friday, I think it was really important that we matched our words with deeds and showed the practical support to give effect to the ICC's mandate. So that just gives you a flavour of what we discussed today. Dylan, over to you if there's anything else you'd like to add.
I think that covers it all. I would just like to thank you, because without your effort it wasn't not possible to be here with so many countries, and just again focusing on the core issue of today, and how do we prevent impunity and how do we help victims. So thank you again, and I think you covered it all.
Great. Well, open to questions. Have we got David from the BBC here? David?
Thank you very much. David Wallace-Lockhart from the BBC. Mr Raab, what can the UK do to ensure that Vladimir Putin faces justice?
Well, I think there's a number of things. First of all, I think hosting this event just a few days fortuitously after that indictment, bringing countries together. We've always said our vision of global Britain is as a force for good in the world, using our soft power, our convening power. Of course, we do it with our Dutch friends who host the International Criminal Court. I think that's very powerful. Having over 40 countries come here and pledge new practical support, which is the kind of nuts and bolts that a criminal court, an international criminal court, needs to do the job. Remember, it's stuck out there in The Hague, there's a court, but you think of all the other wraparound support that any justice system would have, from investigators to witness relocation. That's the kind of practical things that we can do. And if you're asking, will Putin inevitably sit it out? Well, I remember as a young war crimes lawyer in The Hague in 2004, negotiating a sentence enforcement agreement with the UN for the Yugoslavia Tribunal. And 17 years later, Karadzic ended up in a jail, a British jail, as a result of it. Charles Taylor ended up in jail. Milosevic was brought to trial. So I think we've got justice on our side, and I think we've got history on our side, but we'll need to be patient. Can we take a question from Marie from AFP? Is Marie here?
Hello. Can you go more in details about the £4 million additional support that you talked about? Where do they come from? Which countries? Thank you.
I don't know whether you were keeping the Dutch, of course.
No.
The Dutch and the UK put in, but there are 2 or 3 different areas for the support. I was keeping an overall tally. I didn't have the full breakdown, but I would say that actually quite a few countries put in what they can. Of course, there's the regular budget. The ICC needs to be funded on a regular basis. But actually, particularly given the workload involved in Ukraine, I think it's right that those of us that can step up with some extra support. Do you remember any of the others?
No, well, you know, everybody did what they could. So that's on the one hand giving expertise, sending people over from the military, from the police, from different areas, because it's very important that we ensure that we have the evidence that's right now in Ukraine. And of course, a few of the countries also said we have additional funds, and that will go on the one hand to the Diversity Fund, and on the other hand to supporting victims in Ukraine to do their stories and make sure that they are not re-traumatized while giving their story, while doing their story. But at the same time, they get the help they need, but also it will allow the experts to gather the evidence they need from them. So I think the funds will go to those two pillars, and different countries contributed.
Okay, well, given we have our Dutch co-host, can I take a question from ANP? And I'll come, Patrick, to you. Is there...
Yeah, there.
You recognise your
Yes, I recognise him.
What good will this money do for the people in Ukraine in the coming years?
Well, I think the most important thing is that this will help Ukrainians to achieve justice, because we know that there's a war going on right now, and every day, if we would wait for gathering the evidence, we would lose. We would lose important proof and evidence, so there is no time to lose. I think that our colleague from Ireland said, we have to act now, and there is no time to waste. And that is also what the Ukrainians want from us, and I think they are very right to ask that also from us. So this will help, everything together will help to give and bring Ukrainians justice.
Can I also take one from NHK, and is it Mayu Oishi? Because it was important for us to have not just Japan, but also Asian representation here at this conference. I don't know whether we've got... Please.
So, yes, it's on. Right. Okay. What do you think is the importance of Japanese support as a host country of G7?
Sorry, can you...
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
It's my English problem.
No,
sorry.
it's fine. Sorry.
What would you think? What do you think the importance of Japanese support to ICC as a host country of G7?
Well, I think it's incredibly important. Both for Japan's record of being a very strong supporter of the ICC. I remember when I was a Foreign Office lawyer between 2003 and 2006, based in The Hague. There was a Japanese judge seconded there, superb, and actually providing that concrete support for the work of the court is incredibly important. But I also think, from a diplomatic point of view, providing an anchor into Asia and showing and taking a lead from the Asian point of view is also very important, because we still need to expand the support for the ICC. It can't just be a European or a Euro-Atlantic supported court. So I think in both ways, I think it was really important. Dina, I don't know whether you're down.
No, I totally agree. The Japanese leadership to make sure that as a world we are united is very, very important. So I was very glad to see our Japanese colleague here. And he also made remarks to the meeting, of course, this summer, where hopefully they can pick up what we started here.
Patrick, and then I'll come to... Do we have NBC here as well? I wanted to...
Yes.
Great. Well, Patrick first.
Fine. Can I do it? Sorry. Patrick Winter, I work for The Guardian. I wanted to ask you what particularly the British position on this idea of a special tribunal to try the crime of aggression, the leadership crime. Do you accept there is a gap in the law and that it needs to be filled? And how would you like to fill it? And lastly, on the issue of double standards, the Chinese today have been saying the West is applying double standards. And here we are on the anniversary of the invasion of Iraq, where nobody has been sent to any tribunal or court, and arguably it was illegal.
Well, actually, when I was based in The Hague, the ICC did conduct a preliminary examination into the invasion of Iraq and decided, for various reasons, not least because of the accountability we have domestically, that there was no case for proceeding further. And that's why you have an international court, so that it can objectively, independently and impartially look at these things and come to a view. In relation to your first question, which was around...
The aggression tribunal.
Aggression. Look, there was, I mean, principally this meeting was about the nuts and bolts support for the ICC to do its job. But of course we had the Ukrainian Prosecutor General, and there's much discussion about this. I don't think it's so much a gap in the law, it's a more question of jurisdiction, and we'll keep working together to consider it. But I think right now, the priority, certainly at this conference, has been to try and give the ICC the practical support to deliver its mandate. No, we're engaged. We're.
No, you're engaged, but you have a position.
Well, to be honest with you, the discussions are still at a relatively preliminary stage. We understand the importance of it to the people of Ukraine and President Zelensky, and we want to try and support them as best we can. And I think it's certainly true to say that for President Zelensky, the overriding crime above all others has been the invasion and the question of aggression, and we want to try and deal with that and support him as best we can. But it is a much more complicated question to deal with. Let me give the last word to Max Taylor and NBC.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raab. Just wanted to say there's another big meeting obviously going on today in Moscow with President Xi meeting with President Putin. The Chinese are not members of the ICC, but what kind of role could you see China playing in achieving justice in Ukraine, and particularly these issues that have been raised by the ICC?
Well, first of all, by the way, it was excellent to have Bruce Schwartz from the Department of Justice here joining us and to update us on the US position. I think that was really welcomed by everyone here at the conference. In relation to the Chinese position, I don't want to set expectations too high, if I can put it like that, but I think the one thing that China, as a member of the permanent member of the Security Council, a leading member of the international community, can and should do is say that the cardinal rules of international law, including the right not to have your country invaded unlawfully, ought to be adhered to. And I think the extent to which he can, whether it's privately or publicly, apply diplomatic pressure and leverage to that effect, to that extent, would be welcome.
I think this is the best press conference ever.
Has anyone got a question for Dylan? If not, thank you all very much. And thanks again to our Dutch friends for co-hosting with us. And thanks again.